Welcome back. You're watching Newslink, and researchers at the University of Cape Town are calling for higher taxes and more law enforcement to deter people from smoking. They argue the number of South Africans using tobacco products has increased. This in turn places a burden on the country. Let's discuss this further with Sam Filby, a research officer at the University of Cape Town. Thank you very much for joining us this morning, Sam. And let's just maybe talk about the fact that has there actually been an indication as to why more South Africans are smoking, as to what the research has indicated?
Good morning. Thank you for having me on the show. So we recently conducted a global adult tobacco survey in South Africa in which we estimated smoking prevalence. This was conducted or led by the South African Medical Research Council. And the results that have been shown from that study is that smoking prevalence in South Africa has increased compared to our pre-existing estimates, which were derived in 2017. We have various theories as to why we believe that this is the case. We believe that the tobacco control framework in South Africa has significantly stagnated in the past decade. South Africa was world leading in its use of tobacco excise taxes to ultimately reduce the demand for tobacco in the early 1990s and early 2000s. Our approach to tobacco taxation has significantly slowed down. We are increasing excise taxes each year, but not high enough to discourage people from actually smoking. So it's in the context of kind of lax policy geared toward improving public health outcomes that we believe that smoking prevalence has been allowed to rise in the country.
And that's quite worrying, because as you give what you've just shared with us in terms of what you have found out, is the fact that, like you say, more people are smoking, but the lax regulatory environment that exists. Does that breed the ground for younger people to maybe start taking on the habit?
For sure. So one of the key arguments in economics for increasing taxes on tobacco products is that when you increase the price of a product, it becomes less affordable to people who are using that product. Young people, by virtue of the fact that they are more income sensitive, they have less money than their older counterparts because they're less established in their careers or they're still relying on pocket money. So if we increase the prices of cigarettes or other tobacco products, we make them even more affordable for young people than they are for adults who are on average earning more money. So it's important to take a policy stance in which we aggressively increase taxes on tobacco products in order to especially prevent youth from ever starting smoking.
Now, we've had sin taxes that increase annually and people still buy their smokes or cigarettes. So these higher prices that you're calling for, will they change the tide? You've spoken about younger people and maybe using their pocket money or whatever they make on the side. But working adults in the country will always have a little bit of extra money to spend on this habit. So the higher prices, do you think that they'll make much of a difference?
Sure. So in economics, we typically refer to tobacco products as being price inelastic. What that means is when you increase the price of the product, some people will quit, but you will always have people who still continue smoking. That's an economic reality because tobacco products are addictive, and we use this term inelasticity to refer to any product. Alcohol is also inelastic. It's an addictive substance. So what we really are calling for within our research unit is for the National Treasury to more aggressively increase the excise tax. These inflation or a little bit above inflation adjustments that have been occurring in the past 5 to 6 years have not been enough to reduce the affordability of tobacco products. We're aware it's an addictive product. People can be price inelastic in their response to higher prices. However, for the most part, when we increase tobacco product prices, we reduce the demand for those products. And our view is that Treasury should actually be very transparent in its approach to tobacco taxation. So it shouldn't be every year we wait to see what they are going to announce the excise tax increase to be. Our research unit is calling for Treasury to adopt a multi-year approach to tobacco taxation in which it transparently says to all key stakeholders in the tobacco industry and tobacco smokers that we are planning to increase the excise tax on tobacco by 10% above the inflation rate every year. What that does is it lets the industry know we can expect this excise tax. We're not going to fight with Treasury every year about what that increase is going to be. It also allows consumers of tobacco products to factor in the fact that, okay, my smoking habit is going to become more expensive over time. Perhaps I should actually make plans to start quitting.
What about the illicit trade, Sam? Does it not have an impact on the regulation of prices in the country?
Sure. So illicit trade is a very sensitive issue in the realm of tobacco taxation. The tobacco industry has worked tirelessly, both in South Africa and around the world, to convince policymakers that when you increase tobacco taxes, illicit trade increases. This has no credible research backing. And South Africa's own experience with tobacco taxation shows that this is simply not the case. What research by my colleague, Dr. Nicole Velios, shows is that between the early 2000s and about 2009, when excise taxes on tobacco in South Africa were being increased aggressively, the illicit market in South Africa was not a problem. It was standing at less than 5%. Illicit trade became particularly problematic in South Africa from about 2009, 2010 onwards, and became a significant problem in 2014 onwards, which corresponded with the breakdown in the institutional capacity at SARS to actually collect excise tax revenue. Illicit trade can take many forms. It can be smuggling, it can be counterfeiting, it can be tax evasion. I think it's in the interest of players in the tobacco supply chain to communicate to the public that there are people running across the borders with illegal cigarettes. That is not the source of illicit trade in South Africa. It's a source of illicit trade, but it is not the key source. The main type of illicit trade we have in South Africa is tax evasion. And tax evasion is an activity by manufacturers or players in the tobacco supply chain in which they do not pay the excise tax on tobacco. So yes, illicit trade, it's a huge problem in South Africa. My colleague, Dr. Nicole Velios, has estimated that it currently stands at 54% of the illicit market. But that has not got to do with tobacco taxes. That's got to do with criminals and money. It's tax evasion. So yes, we need to increase tobacco taxes, and we also need to address our unacceptably high levels of illicit trade. I mean, 54% is well above the global average. But that requires adequate enforcement. And there's an international treaty called the International Protocol to Eliminate Illicit Trade in Tobacco Products that South Africa has not yet ratified. And what that treaty does is it takes all countries in the world and it says, we have this supply of tobacco problem. Illicit trade is a problem. How can we, as a global community, tackle this threat? And it gives policy measures of what governments should do in order to reduce illicit trade in tobacco products. For example, implementing track and trace technology on cigarette packs. We don't have that in South Africa. Requiring licensing of agents in the tobacco supply chain. That is not adequately enforced in South Africa at the moment. So illicit trade is a problem, but it should not threaten efforts to promote public health, such as aggressive increases in the excise tax on tobacco.
Very interesting insights there, Sam. Thank you very much for your time this morning. That is Sam Filby, Research Officer at the University of Cape Town, speaking